Hello, good morning, folks. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Hello.
Hey, let's give a minute more for others to join in. I know few of the folks have want to join in on the security calls. Let's wait for them. Okay, I've shared the link to the wiki page for today's meeting notes. Feel free to add in your name in the attendance section. Also, there is a set of discussion items mentioned in there. Let me share my screen. Uh, Okay, it's 2 minutes past our regular time. Everyone, welcome to the SIG Security weekly meeting. This call is recorded, and here is the agenda that you see on the screen. The first agenda item is actually towards the OpenSSF checks and Glow monitor findings that we had discussed previously. But this was brought to our notice again because now would so what happened was yesterday there was a discussion in the SIG release meeting about how do we handle some of the findings that we have from these toolings, and whether we should be able to whether we should be creating a common template for so that anyone creating a new repo in the Nephew project organization follows the same template, or is there any other method or technique that we would like to follow? So, let me just open up one of the checks here. Wade, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be on the call today. But here is the set of action items from both Glow Monitor, and we recently had checked even the LFX security dashboard. This seems to be having some interesting information as well. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this. For some reason, these four sections loaded for me just once, and I tried an hour before it never loaded for me. Uh, if if anyone else has, uh, you know, if anyone else can check whether it works, can you check whether it works for you, this particular link? Okay. So one of the first questions that came up was all these findings, all this exceptions that are found here. If you have to handle it, how do we handle it consistently across all the all the project repos that we have in FVO project? So how do we handle that is what was one of the questions. So the point that we discussed in the SIG release meeting was that we can have a template that everyone could follow for any new project repo that is created under Nephew project. But if there is any other point or any other technique that anyone would like to bring to the fore, now would be a good time. This is something that we would like to take up immediately after the R2 release is done or announced. Okay. Uh, so I guess this will continue working on. We'll prepare a template, right? Like we'll prepare a. Yes, Prashant, please go ahead.
If like there are issues with if the score is less because of like coding, like code issues, then we can like implement CI security checks, whatever CI security checks are there. Like, do we have in Nephew in projects right now? Anywhere?
Yes. There are some of those checks, and in fact, if you see here, unfortunately, Gaurav mentioned that it is working for him, this particular part. But you see here, right? Like, code secrets detected, license issues, vulnerabilities. All of these things are found after scanning the container image or the code repos, is what my understanding is. I'm still looking for more details here, but yesterday I saw that there were two things: the gripe scan and the trivy scan was already done as part of all the project repos. So based on that, there is already some information that is presented.
Hmm.
Yeah. There were two things that preparing a common template that can be shared across all the projects, and keeping a common GitHub action workflows, that can be easily imported, that can be imported in the individual repos. These are the two things that we discussed. Uh, if So this would allow us to, the common templates would help us to create contributor guidelines, would help us to create a few other points, a few other common documentation point that have to be present across all the project repos. And these could be some of the GitHub action workflows. For example, if you have to scan the tree, do some scanning, common scanning across all the project repos, then the GitHub action workflows could be used. But again, this is something that will take up after the R2 release is done, and I believe it is to be announced this week. So stay tuned. Uh, Ved is on the call. Ved, any other point that you want to bring forth? I know that you're looking at the LFX security dashboard this week. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about?
I joined late, sorry, but
Okay,
according to my
okay.
knowledge, I had opened up. Yeah.
Hey, your voice is breaking up a little bit for me. I'm not sure if it is. Mm.
Hello. Am I audible now?
No, your voice is breaking up for me.
Hello.
No.
Wait, yeah, we can't hear you properly.
Yeah. That's fine, Ved. I think there are notes already mentioned in here. I'll sync up with you later. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Do you have any quick point to be made in the context? So what we were saying is that one of the first things that we need to
Uh,
take up after the R2 release is done is to pick up this issue back and see what are the low-hanging fruits that we can target
yeah,
in 443 and 444, these two issues, and
yes.
prepare a common template across that can be shared across all the projects, and prepare maybe a common GitHub action workflows that can be shared across all the project repos. These
Yeah,
were the.
sure.
Hmm? Okay,
Uh,
cool. Cool. So from the LFX security dashboard perspective, again, the information is out there. Anyone is free to check the dashboard. For some reason, for me, the dashboards are not completely uh, popping up. So I see that. Yeah, seems for Prashant also it is not loading. Okay. Service mesh updates. Are there any updates? I think the primary work item or the primary action item that we are looking from any new work item is the creation of that requirements document based on user story template that was proposed in the last call. Uh,
One question, is there any documentation from Shiv for the service mesh updates or not yet?
I think there was one slide deck that was prepared by Shiv. Shiv, if you're on call, can you interject and talk about it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you can
so
share, it would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we had tried to capture a basic set of requirements, and that was done. So I just put it in a user story template and then send it
Okay.
across. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, post this call.
Where can I find the basic the work you've done before? I mean, if
Yeah,
you can have the document and let me know.
yeah, sure. I'll post it to the
Yeah.
in the Slack. I just put it in this one document and send it across.
Okay.
Sure.
One additional one. After I got the Shiva's document, I'm gonna take a look at, and also I look at the Beam's point. Is basically we cannot apply the service mesh blindly everywhere. So he mentioned about single root IOV, and also I based on the nephew architecture, there is a nephew component, vendor component, third party component. Nephew component, maybe we can do a service mesh, but the vendor component and third party component is not our control. So maybe that's why Beam talking about single root IOV. I don't know, but and also we have management cluster and then a workload cluster. Anyway, there's several questions in my mind. So once I got the information from Ship, and if you can share, then I can take a look and then go further. And also I understand Beam's point too. So Beam, did I understand your point?
Yeah, it's not so much related to the vendor, in my view. It's more related to the way the network is implemented.
Between
So
management and then workload cluster? Network
no,
or
because
internal?
there we don't do anything special at the moment.
Okay.
It's mainly so you basically so in Kubernetes you have a default, what I call a default network, right? Which is the pod network. And then you have all the other networks that you can create as what you can say secondary interfaces.
Okay.
Those I would stay away from, the secondary interfaces. The other one is okay.
Okay. Okay, and then one more point is I think Kieran Johnson, he's not here today, but he said he will propose some item access control to nephew CRs and others and other APIs. Anyway, that's probably next week. So, okay, thank you. That's all I have question.
I think there was some requirements that were captured in this particular discussion. Wim brought it up again.
Yes, that's what I read. That's what I read.
Yeah, and most of this, I mean, whatever I had was basically this only. Probably I can elaborate a couple of lines and here and there, but I think this is the crux of that particular requirements that we had discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a work in progress. From the secrets management, any updates from you, Prashant?
Yeah, so like I sent some points, right, that like we could, there were some things that a vault can handle easily, like token rotation and all that. So I did make a user story template still in draft, but you can take a look at it. And the reason, well, only familiar with vault like till now. Like I know how
Oh,
it
that's
works
fine.
there. Like,
In terms of the secrets management tool to make use of, I think that could be a separate discussion. If we can plot out the requirements first, and bring it to the fore.
yeah, like how do we do, like what requirements? What's the base of it? Uh,
Yeah, the requirements could be what are could be in the form of how do we handle secret sharing across multiple clusters, right? If there is a requirement for an edge cluster to access a secret, what would be the way? How would they be authorized? What would be the mode of authorization? Like, are we going to make use of the service account to actually authorize to the vault manager? I feel, Prashant, no point in thinking too much. Bring the document to the table, and then we can, uh, uh, add points to it together, right? Like in the sense, once we have it on the in the discussion, we'll have better.
Yeah, I've uploaded a draft on the SIG Security
Oh,
channel.
this
Y-
the same draft. Uh,
I will link it on the meeting notes as well.
that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other point in the context? Anything else?
Can you just quickly see Prashant's user story and then
Okay.
I have updated. Yeah, you can see that.
Okay.
That's the current setup. What's happening, and
Thank you for the document, Prashant. Let's visit this because I haven't gone into the details of this document. Thank you. Thank you for the document.
We don't use OAuth2, by the way, for Git here. I don't believe they even support it, but I'm not 100% sure. At least a year ago when I looked at it, they didn't.
They don't support the OS too. Okay.
wait, Gitty doesn't, or
At the time when I was looking into it, because see, I took the latest build to be able to get a token creation, so that was not even there.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, I guess because right now in the documentation it was mentioned OAuth2 is.
okay, maybe they added it, so they because they are changing as well. But so so I'm talking about a year ago. Yeah, a little bit
Yeah,
less.
so if
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
implement that, yeah, change it for ourselves. Now it's updated, so
Yeah, it looks like they support now. They talking about OS to providers. So we'll see.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I think this is a call for review, right, for this document then?
yes.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can. But if anything other than Vault, any Vault like system, anyone has any suggestion, then you can just put it there.
What I'm always worried about these things is we have to, because if we want to use it, we should try to. What is the footprint that you need to add it to the setup and stuff like that?
Okay,
It's a
I'll add that.
we have to have that consideration. Typically, you need 3 and stuff like that, right? So, but you have a dev. I think Vault, you have a dev implementation which only needs 1, I think. But we have to consider the footprint because we have to run them in CI and whether they are open source and whether we
Yeah.
can freely access them, and so those type of things will be important for us to see how we can consume it.
Mm.
Or we had a public so there is multiple ways, but we have to think about how this would run in a CI and in a repeatable fashion eventually. That's always a
Yeah.
challenge with these tools.
One question is are we talking about Hashcode Vault, right? Is that right?
Yes. That's the
Yeah, but yeah, you plan to use open source, but I'm not sure their license. If once I think they're
yes.
free to start, but once using it, they have to some pay. I don't know what the
No, we
complication
cannot.
to.
I think it would be a risk to use open source, no, the Vault, HashiCorp Vault as it
Okay.
is. But there is a fork.
Yes, yes.
Just like Terraform, there is Open Tofu now. There is a fork of Vault that exists in the open source.
So you're gonna use the open source version of the Vault. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm just concerned. So, okay.
Like my idea is to use open source, but HashiCorp Vault has the I'm used to it and it has documentation like no other. I haven't checked much open source tools. I know they are similar to Vault as well, right? So
Mhm.
it shouldn't be that different.
Yeah.
But the default system from Nephew, propose the open source version, but the vendor and operator, when they integrate into their system of the Nephew, then they can choose. And
Yeah,
they-
yeah. I think one consideration that we need to give is the ability to use any other secrets management tool, because on GCP and EKS, folks might want to choose a native tool in place of yeah.
yeah, I'm okay with that.
So we need to have a loose coupling at that particular point,
Yeah. Good for you. Good point.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think I've already talked about this. I don't know why I've mentioned this again. Per repo best practices templates, we have already talked about here. Again, the best practices templates are needed for OpenSSF and every other best practices fulfillment. So I'm going to skip on this one. Yesterday, Rado mentioned about fulfilling Salsa L4 requirements. Basically, the requirements are towards signing the container images, getting the provenance, basically having a complete flow. This would be a big work item, but this was brought to the fore by Rado yesterday. He said he'll be joining our future meetings. But if there is any interest in the working group here or in the SIG here to take this up, please call it out. And again, a requirement document has to be prepared, but this would be much straightforward because there already is this essentially would serve as the requirements document in the first place, right? The user story template in this context might be much easier to fulfill. Anyone thinks otherwise or should not be taking up this right now, or any other thoughts in the context? Again, we don't know whether we'll be able to take this up right now because obviously all of these action items requires some ownership, some contributors, some committers. So depending upon what is available, what is who joins the working for the actual work getting done, it would be taken up. Okay, with that said, next on the agenda is to discuss about policy framework. This point was brought up by Subhash. Just a a basic comment to be made before we start on this discussion. There are a lot of Kubernetes best practices that needs to be followed, and we need some sort of a mechanism and admission controller based mechanism to handle these best practices. So I'm not sure at till what level we had taken these discussions previously, Subhash. Maybe if you can just uh, explain the team here about what was discussed previously. Is there any document that is present? And how do you intend to take this any further? If we can just take 5 minutes to explain that. Subhash, are you there? I can't hear you, man. Eh, eh, people can hear me? Anyone can hear me?
Yeah.
Are you
Okay.
audible now?
Yes.
No, I didn't. Okay, Subhash, yeah.
Subhash, are you there? We can't hear you, man. You seem to be unmuted, but we can't hear you.
He said give him 2 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay, that is essentially the last action item for us to discuss. I guess in the coming few weeks, we might have multiple things to review. And after R2, anyways, we have specific action items to handle from the OpenSSF and Flow Monitor perspective. Meanwhile, let's open up the floor for any other point anyone wants to bring up right now.
Yeah, hi Rahul. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So could I share my screen so that
yes.
I'll go through the content
Please.
of what we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
I think I'm not getting an option to share my entire screen.
Okay.
Let me try that. Yeah. Okay. Just check if it's visible.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Actually, we were discussing during the beginning of to also this topic, the policy. So we are trying to frame some a framework where we could have a common point. From that, we can control the entire nephew in terms of governance, accessibility, authorization, access, everything. So yeah, this document along with that I had written along with Tal, and also these things we discussed over the SIG SIG 1 meetings, and Wim was also the part there, and other folks were also there. So in this document, actually, we try to capture a lot of information, like what should be the exact meaning of the policy for an FU, or policy is an overloaded term, and how it could be understood. So we had some multiple discussion. And yeah, of course, we agree that policy is very important. But thing is that we need to understand what is exact policy for the nephew and how it could be applied to it. So when we started this document, so we identified some policy sources. So that I captured in this document. Like it could come from the vendor. So like a person who creates the package, so he knows his product better, right? And it is getting onboarded, and he could put the policy related to it. And the person who is a network architect, that could be the second source of policy. Like he connects the NF and he deploys to the network. So he could have his own visualization around the policy. It's like what should be restricted, what should be the valid values, and what could be the possible configuration, and what configuration should not be allowed. And the third point where the organization get involved, like I'm deploying in a certain workload or certain organization. So I would be having a certain limitation, like I should always pulling the image from so and so repository, or I should have a network configured to this particular interface. So multiple scenarios you can think it. So we identified these three sources, and around that we try to visualize this initial diagram. So like in the management cluster, we would be having one common module where a user could come, he can create onboard his policy, and based on the package, we can take those policies, we create a policy instance, and we could apply it. And initially when I started, I started like it could be there could be chances for package validation. Like we are creating the package that goes through the different specializer, and we add VLAN, IP address, or multiple things we add it. So we are not sure like what configuration are getting injected. So just to validate those things, I was thinking that this could be a possible scenario. And with that means I prepared a small demo also, and that I demonstrated. So this is the one. And one interesting topic I wanted to bring that shift left approach or shift right approach. Like for example, we deploy the thing and we test whether then we restrict the thing. So like we do the validation test or after deployment test, just to validate our deployments, right? So that was the shift right approach. So using the policy, we could make it like a shift left approach. Like before deployment itself, we can validate our packages. So that idea was trying to put it. So with that, I was trying to give the idea, like there could be a component or module like themis. Just I named it this particular piece like a themis, and that will create those policies as a packages and keep somewhere in the repository. And when the packages are here in the workload, sorry, in the management cluster, when the specializer process those packages or specialize the package, so that time we could take those policies and put it inside the package and deploy it. So that was the initial thought process, like for just targeting the package validation. But yeah, slowly we also explored the idea of design time and runtime policies. Like actually, design time is I call it like a static policies. Like suppose we are going to deploy certain NF, so I would like to validate what image is there, what configuration is there, or even what kind of memory requirement, those things I can validate. I just calling those as a static or the design time things which I can directly visualize by the manifest YAML files. And the runtime policies are the more complex one, where we go inside the NF and we restrict the certain executables to execute, or allow certain folders to access, read, write. So those kind of things. So those are some different set of policies. So just I'm calling it as a runtime policies. And yeah, I also identified these two possible candidate which can perform this design time and runtime policies. So one is the OPA. So the Kubernetes, in the Kubernetes world, we can use it like a gatekeeper. So gatekeeper is actually admission controller, which help us to validate our YAMLs or deployment. Whenever we deploy it will just take those key values and allow as per the policy. And the second thing is the kube. So that also comes under the CNCF umbrella, and that has the capability to configure some runtime policies. And here I see the possibilities of using the eBPF also, like using the eBPF, we could monitor the NF, and also by these capabilities we can configure those policies. So that possibilities are there. It's like we can interact with the NF at the runtime, and also it can by using the eBPF we could configure the monitoring. So that could be interesting thing. I see the possibility there. And overall, in this way we were discussing, and some use cases also I identified and discussed. Like one is the package validation, and second is the runtime policy enforcement, a container based practices. Of course, that is a desirable one for us, and policy conflict resolution. So that is a later part, like when we use the policy for the governing our NFs, or maintaining the access management, if you do it. And yeah, and also like I missed one part, like we can do some role segregation, like the people who work on the packages just focus there, and the people who work on the policy, they focus on the policy, with how the restriction or how the allow rules will look like. They focus on separate domains, and they work together. So those possibilities I see we can solve it. So yeah, this was just a glimpse I have given about this document, and yeah, this one we discussed in the SIG 1 also. But yeah, based place, I feel like this is the SIG security where we can start implementing it. So yeah, with this context, any questions do you have? I think
Yes.
we can discuss. Yeah.
Yes, Subhash, I have a few basic questions, and
Yeah.
possibly these might have been addressed already because you have presented this before.
Yeah.
One is, you mentioned about management and configuration policies. You talked about service assurance, and I understand that there is already some work that is happening in the context. Is there any relevance of that work here in the context of security, in the context of security premise? Is there any relevance here? Because management and configuration policies, if you just call it policies,
Mhm.
it becomes too wide a term, right? Like it's not then necessarily only related
Yeah.
to security. So we'll have to be very careful about that, because when you talked about policy conflict resolution, you mentioned things which is not necessarily the aspects of security.
Correct. Actually, the use case, like when policy comes into the picture, so there definitely some policy will conflict with each other. So that's why I brought it. Otherwise, it is not related to security. I would say that need to be resolved, need to be
Okay.
addressed as part of framework. So you can put like it's a framework related use case. But yes, in the security side, definitely we should provide like a container based practices, runtime or design time policy enforcement, and yeah, the validation scenario for the packages, even the repository or even the workload related stuff. So there I think we can visualize the we can see the security, and we can bring those policies there, especially related to security policies. We can design it. Yeah.
Just a quick question, Subhash. I think the same question as Rahul mentioned. So I
Yeah.
think the last week I mentioned about that. So policy framework, definitely security, some item and other, things they are using policies, and also
Yeah.
Istio, they're using policies. So that's why I mentioned about there's a security domain, they use policies, but you have a policy framework that you want to handle security. That confused. I mean, because policies you working about general term, but definitely laws. That's part of the security. But the way handling the policy in security could be some kind of a little different from policy framework focus. That's why I'm still confused. I'm still
Yeah.
confused because
Yeah.
So that's why when we define the vault, when we define item, when we define service mesh, and when we define some other the security, the secure communication, that architecture they have supported the policies. That is not from policy framework we're talking about. That's why I'm okay. Anyway, I'm just giving some confusion. I'm not sure Rahul has the same question or not, but so anyway. Okay.
Could I just add my thoughts here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, actually, I see like I'll just give one example. Like currently in the workload cluster, what we do when we deploy any UPF or any AMF, we provide the image name there, and it simply goes to the repository and image repository and downloads it and runs it, right? So we could bring those possibilities, like even the operator get involved there. He can bring his organizational security best practices and apply it there. It should not only mean like if you go with Istio or anything, it's a very low level policies, right? I think operator, if we go by the policy framework, we opens that possibility that the policies are API driven. Like the operator could involve there. He can create his policies at the abstract level, and then it could be realized, applied in the workload based on the workload technology. It's whatever it got implemented based on that. It can be implemented so that we are hardening the NFO architecture. By if we take the same example, we could say that from the operator side, now it will download only it will deploy only those NFs which are coming from one authorized image repository. So in this way we are hardening it. So
So Shubhash, my 2 cents here. I think what in most cases the use cases that you're pointing out towards are admission controller use cases, right? Like that fulfilled by OPA, and admitting only the authorized repositories, allowing only privileged, non-privileged containers to be deployed, non-root users to be used in the context, all the best practices like Kubernetes best practices. All these are admission controller features that can be implemented. And the first 3 use cases are basically pointing towards that. Even the runtime policy enforcement, basically an admission controller can say that this is a new workload and these needs to handle these set of runtime policies. It could be network policies, it could be kube armor policies, it could be something else policies, So
Yes.
from the admission controller, from the security point of view, I see the point here. So we have to ensure that the scope remains in the context of security aspects, and the use case document should clearly reflect those specific use cases at a granular level, where basically including, when we say container best practices, maybe we can enlist what are the actual best practices that we would like to fulfill as part of this. The second our
Of course.
point is,
Yeah.
yeah. So just one more point in the context that
Mhm.
I see that OPA is already deployed as part of the management cluster, and I don't know if there are any use cases that are already fulfilled by through that deployment. I see that an admission controller is already in place as part of Nephew management
In
cluster.
Nephew,
Yeah.
I did not observe OPA in a management cluster in the Nephew. I could be wrong also. Anyone comment like if they have seen the gatekeeper in the management cluster of Nephew?
No, I don't think we deploy it by default, right? But my sense is the following: on the management cluster, right?
Mhm.
Okay, at the moment for the sandbox, we basically have an approval controller, so we auto approve, right? For me, so what would be probably useful to do is, and which is anyhow, independent of whether you do it in Nephew or outside of Nephew, doesn't really matter. But if you look to the architecture we have, is that the result of what comes out of the management cluster ideally in the shift left approach can be validated through a CI system, through anything, right? And for me, that's where this was architected in by default. So in other words, any system that people want to use, they could use, right? So in other words, you can do lots of validation ahead of applying anything to the workload cluster. So architecturally, we don't have to change anything to make that happen. And that was already in place from the beginning. So rather than trying to inject in the pipeline and stuff like that, I believe it's better to let the pipeline as is, and add that validation before you actually apply to the workload cluster. As a result, you have a big bang for the buck. I'm not saying we solve all the problems. We solve a lot of them.
I agree. Yeah. I think we should brainstorm like what we could take and what we could implement to make it simplistic also, not too much complex.
But for that, you don't have to implement anything, basically, because you get no, but we have the tools, is what I'm trying to say, right? So as a result, what you see is that, okay, you get a certain manifest out of the pipeline, right? That comes from the management cluster. We have that in Git, right? So before you do an approval, you can actually do a set of CI task or manual task, and so you could add policy framework, or you could add some admission controllers and what have you that act upon it and then approve or disapprove, right? So and you can leverage OPA for that, for example, out of the box.
So Wim, do you mean this should be out of channel? I mean to say, when we from the Git, when we deploy to the workload cluster, in that path you are talking about, or it's completely out of channel?
No. So see, what happens when we do specialization, right? So we basically get a result and we say it's okay for the specialization pipeline. At the moment, we do auto approval, but you don't have to do auto approval. So the policy right now is say, okay, we do auto approval, but you could basically take the package as in Git, right? So someone needs to approve it. So what I'm saying is, take OPA and apply it to the manifests that are in that Git repo before, and check the policy rules against that package, and as a result, you can see whether or not this is according to compliance. And by doing so, we can use any tooling out of the box from Kubernetes to make that happen.
I got it. Yeah. You are saying that we latched on the ETL. Yeah.
Yeah,
please
just
go
a
ahead.
quick
Go ahead.
question. Yeah, a quick question, Vim. So basically, we anyway have, as part of KRM, we have mutators and validators, right? As part of the
Correct.
this one. So can the policy part also be part of that mutator and validator, or that's not the correct place to do it?
No, we can. So we could do it, right? So, but what I'm trying to say is that you have now a problem of, let's say, who is you almost so the way I look at this is you want a third party to do the validation, right? So if you put it in the same pipeline, then someone can screw it up, right?
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So from that point of view, that's why I'm more thinking about the fact that let's see this, like it's the same thing as you have certain people do a design, right? And they need to follow certain security best practices. We will say what the best practices are, but at the end of the day, someone will validate whether the result of the best practices were implemented, right? So they are typically implemented by two separate groups. And of course, we want to make them work together better, right? And to improve what the pipeline executes. But on the other hand, there is still a value for a third party to validate whether they adhere to the policy, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that if you intermingle those two roles, it becomes more tricky.
Yeah, agree. Yep.
Vim, actually, I'm also trying to visualize this problem. What I'm trying to focus here, that operator could able to express his policies or his intent in terms of the policy, and also we are trying to solve the fragmented policy problem, like different workload cluster have the different technology for the policy administration. So we create those policies based on the intent of the operator and put in the workload. So the point of what I think we discussed, that is about the package validation, right? But we could expand the scope of the policy in the workload cluster also. That I think any Mr. What, any suggestion from you? Like, do you think I'm thinking in the right direction?
So my feedback would be this.
Yep.
Let's not boil the ocean from the beginning, right? So
of course.
these are all separate problems and separate issue domains, right? So I think the problem with your proposal here is it tries to cover too many stuff, and as a result, people get confused, and it's hard to make progress, right? So I think I'm always of the opinion, let's do one thing and do it one thing well, and then move to the next thing and do that very well, right? So as a result, you make progress, right? If you try to boil the ocean, it's a challenge to achieve anything, right? So, coming back to the question on the workload cluster, right? I think that is then yet another stage of your admission and validation and stuff like that, right? But again, as I was saying, so the question is, what is then the biggest bang for the buck that you have from an operator point of view, right? Because if you do a validation before you apply to the workload cluster, I would say that you have done a lot of checks already before you actually apply, right? So the value of doing it again and again, and so some people are paranoia, right? So I'm not saying that this is not needed, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that we are not over complicating things. That doesn't result in a lot of, let's say, benefit.
But I feel a lot of folks, they ask about putting the policy in the workload cluster. I think it is very important. They have the security policies configured in the workload cluster, so that they did not they don't want to take any chances of misconfiguration or any security problem. So I feel policies are still important there in the workload cluster.
But so I just because Rahul has his hand, but I would say the following, right? The system to do the validation before you apply to the cluster in most cases does not exist today, right? So we have to put it in the right context, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think this is the fundamental notion of Nephew about deploying the edge clusters in a gated manner from the management cluster allows us to do approval before the deployment in the edge cluster from the management cluster side itself. So if we can tap into that particular hook points, and since everything is a Kubernetes resource, we should still be able to leverage UPA or Kyverno or any other generic Kubernetes admission controller to tap into that particular aspect. So, Shubhas, I think this is a great point and is a very quick win and a nice, elegant win, right? Like we should be able to directly deploy all the best practices by ensuring that we can hook into the management cluster at the approval stage itself.
Yeah, I agree, Rahul, for this point. But what I'm trying to bring the second aspect, you can do the package validation, you can validate those KRMs, you can validate those deployment.
Right.
But the policy actually, the problem comes when the end up become executable. It runs in your workload cluster. So let's say it does any malicious stuff, then how we are going to identify it? So
No,
I
wait a
think
second.
that, yeah.
No, wait a second. So that does not fall under the realm of admission controller. Then it forms under the realm of runtime security. For example,
Right. I agree.
So what you're saying is that if in the workload clusters, if we have to deploy default network policies to deny egress all for certain workloads, let's say, for example, okay, then that particular policy cannot be deployed in the management cluster, that network policy, right?
Yeah.
So that has to be deployed in the workload cluster.
Yes.
That is what you are trying to say. Or if you want to allow only particular microservices to speak to other microservices, it could be service mesh policies or anything that have to be deployed in the target workload cluster. But then it does not. So the only thing that the admission controller is doing in this context is orchestrating that particular policy to be deployed in the target workload clusters, right? So the scope of the admission controller finishes there, isn't it?
I agree. Yeah. So
that's why I think you have to we have to segment the problem into those two segments, right? So because I agree with Rahul that one is runtime security, the other one is basically whether it's admission, it's a bit more than that. But so it's a different set of checks that we. So I just to be clear, Subhash, I'm not ignoring the fact on the workload cluster, but for me it's a separate problem, right? Because I think the runtime is where you get the biggest bang for the buck. But again, here we have the tools, right? So I think that there are tools available in the system that that the Kubernetes ecosystem has developed that we should just leverage out of the box. What I'm trying to say is that it's nothing for Nephew to do that necessarily.
At least I think we need to have some layer which can integrate with those tools, right? In the Nephew, am I right?
Yeah. So the approval mechanism, right, that we mentioned, that approval mechanism currently it's an auto approval mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So if we hook into that, and that approval mechanism would need, a mechanism which essentially OPA like tooling provides, right? Like wherein if something is going to get deployed, you want to allow it based on certain criteria, and that criteria could be user specified policies in the form of admission controller policies, right? So that so those are the things that would be required. But there are 2 points. One is what should that auto approval and the approval mechanism look like? And the second is the runtime policies in the actual workload cluster. Let's keep these two separate. And we identify requirements towards each of this separately and take it up separately is what I feel to begin
Of course,
with.
I agree. Actually, I was just trying to visualize in terms of the policy. So of course, these two could be segregated. I agree. Yeah.
Right. Cool. So if we are good towards this, right, like then the user story template or the user requirements could specifically point fine-grained aspects about what these approvals would look like. It could be checking the manifest and not allowing certain things to be allowed based on the best practices guidelines and things like that, right? Like those specific use cases we can document and try to fulfill as part of this work item to begin. Yeah. It's a low hanging fruit in my opinion, and which provides great out of the box hardening for Nephew, right? Mm.
Plus, I think what is also important, Sebastian, is identify what is missing from the ecosystem to supply that, right? So, because see, I think what we are focused upon right now in Nephew is we try to accommodate for or try to add capabilities that today we lack, right? Or we have limited support for and stuff like that. So one of the things that we're also trying to do is like this whole shift left approach with the native Kubernetes system did not exist, right? So that's a bang for the buck, if you will. If you just say we apply OPA policy to a set of manifests, okay, this customer use OPA, the other one use Caverno. We don't want to be in the business of managing those policies, right? So that's not what we try to do in Nephew as such. So then it's basically saying, okay, apply OPA or apply Caverno to this thing and job done, right?
Right, of course, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is great. Actually, this categorization, this split of responsibilities, right, would allow us to clearly identify the requirements and achieve towards it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. So thank you, Wim, and thank you, Rahul, for
Thank
giving
you
the
for
clear
bringing it up.
segregation. Yeah, to implement it, and thank you for your feedback.
Awesome. We have 3 more minutes left. I think we are almost done. Any other point that anyone wants to bring up? Okay, everyone. Thank you. Have a good week ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ro.
Thank you.